Some mornings, it's like the world sends a warning before your mind's even awake. At 6:14 a.m., that unmistakable pulse of red and blue lit up my window. Sheriff's cruiser at the end of my gravel drive, engine humming with intent. Never a good sign out here. The deputy stepped out, eyes sharp, voice steady. "Sir, we received a 911 call about a disturbance." Standing there in my own doorway, barely awake, I tried to remember the last time I'd spoken to anyone, let alone disturbed the peace. Across the road, Karen leaned against her SUV, arms folded, looking for all the world like she was in charge of the day. Not an ounce of doubt in her posture, not a flicker of regret. The deputy asked if anyone else was inside. "Nope, just me." Karen didn't say a word, didn't add a detail, just kept that cool, expectant stare. A realization started crawling up my spine. She wasn't out here to solve anything. She was here to assert control. And as usual, had no clue who she'd picked a fight with. Names matter less than intentions out here, but I'll introduce myself, Dan. Daniel Harper, not a troublemaker, never have been. Avoiding conflict is my default setting. 5 years back, when city noise and burnout finally caught up with me, this cabin was the antidote. Losing someone close changed my priorities overnight. Impressing people. Not important. Waking up breathing easy. That's everything. No big plan, no get-rich-quick scheme, just quiet. No footsteps but my own. Out here, time moves slower, and the only routine is whatever you build with your hands. Mornings started early. Days were for simple work. Evenings ended with the kind of silence you could almost hear. This place became my sanctuary. Peace mattered more than money. Attention wasn't on the shopping list, neither was control over anyone but myself. If respect flows both ways, people stay out of each other's business. That's always been the code in this stretch of hills. Dirt roads, scattered cabins, a handful of weathered homes that outlasted the folks who built them. No one cares what kind of truck you drive or how straight your fence stands. Unwritten rules keep us honest. Help your neighbor if they need it, but don't pry. Silence here isn't cold, it's comfort. That rhythm, that mutual respect, it kept everything balanced. Birds at sunrise, slow afternoons, evenings sliding into night without a fuss. Even when change crept in, more cars, strange faces, headlights moving too quick down the washboard lanes, most folks shrugged it off. Life shifts. People come and go. Looking back, that was the first warning. Conversations grew cautious. Eyes lingered at the end of driveways. A new tension took root, subtle at first, but enough to make the air feel thin. The biggest shift arrived with construction, new houses on the southern edge. Bit by bit, lots cleared survey flags where there'd only been wild grass before. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Folks build. Karen introduced herself soon after, firm handshake, polite smile, that steady, "I'm used to being obeyed" tone. Quality of life, long-term value, her buzzwords, not ours. She organized meet and greets with printed flyers, talked about standards and protecting the image of the neighborhood. Her language didn't match the land. Out here, people value sleep more than resale. A few weeks in, the HOA idea landed. "Just administrative," she said, "here to help." Some of the newer faces nodded. Old-timers smiled tight. I kept to myself. My place was older outside their lines, or so I thought. Karen's conversations with me were all smiles and veiled hints. Store equipment out of sight, keep mornings quieter. Think about curb appeal. One comment at a time, nothing outright but a pattern forming her order, replacing the neighborhood's old calm. Each neighbor handled it differently. Most stayed silent, hoping the phase would pass. Change always arrives dressed as politeness. No one wants to call it what it is. I didn't argue, didn't sign a thing, didn't show up to meetings. Karen never confronted me but assumed compliance would follow. That was my mistake, thinking calmness alone could keep conflict at bay. First contact from the HOA came neat and polite with Karen's name and a shiny new logo. Concerns, not complaints, about noise equipment, emerging expectations. No demands, just suggestions to review guidelines and align. I hadn't joined, hadn't agreed. Still, the message read as if the decision was already made. Karen followed up in person, clipboard in hand, all neighborly, talking about consistency, never asking if the HOA applied, just assuming it did. That night I dug out my deed. Black and white, my property was mine, predating any association. No covenants, no shared authority, no loopholes. I replied with courtesy, Made it clear I wasn't part of any HOA, but I'd keep being a good neighbor. Her response stayed neutral. She hoped things would work themselves out. Over the next weeks, HOA notices multiplied reminders about noise invitations to participate, each one assuming authority that didn't exist. I kept my routine, believing that calm boundaries would be respected. Instead, the pressure quietly increased. Official notices from the county started showing up, concerns about compliance always vague, never substantiated. Inspectors apologized, found nothing wrong, but the paper trail grew. It was death by documentation. Curiosity replaced frustration. I started keeping records, dates, departments, everything said. Inspectors were never confrontational. Karen stayed polite, concerned, never named in complaints, just reporting issues as she noticed them. Ruthless, but technically true. Each inspector's visit created more paperwork. Each advisory meant more time explaining myself. Bureaucracy doesn't need to win, it just has to wear you down. Neighbors quietly compared notes. One had an ancient shed suddenly under review. Another got a warning about their driveway. Each story had the same pattern: HOA contact, county complaint, nothing found. The real twist landed when a neighbor mentioned being asked right after refusing HOA suggestions if he'd thought about selling. The timing was too neat. Pressure reminders. Then if you push back a gentle suggestion that maybe you'd be better off cashing out before things get complicated. Not everyone took it as a threat, but the intent was obvious. What started as polite control grew teeth. My gate left open, turned up closed. Tools moved. Mailbox vanished. Postmaster said it had been reported for visibility issues. Driveway blocked by mystery cones. Generator tampered with. Still nothing you could pin on anyone. Just interference, just enough to rattle the routine. Complaints shifted from administrative to personal claims of aggression. Disturbances always vague, never true, but enough to create a record. Even the county inspectors started whispering, "Somebody really wants to keep your place on the radar." That's when I installed cameras, not to catch anyone, just to protect myself. Sure enough, footage caught someone lurking, then leaving. The next day, another complaint arrived about after-hours disturbances. The narrative was being built complaint by complaint. Eventually, the police started showing up. First a welfare check, then noise complaints. Each time, nothing. Still, every call left a record. One morning, cruisers lined the road and Karen watched from across the way, sure she'd finally forced the issue. But the deputies didn't find trouble. They found a pattern, a file full of nothing. One deputy suggested keep documenting. If this keeps up, it's on the caller, not you. After that, I went deep on my paperwork, uncovering old deeds and surveys. Turns out the HOA's reach was assumed never real. A local attorney confirmed my land, not theirs, and their authority on shaky ground for much of the neighborhood. A single formal notice set things right. County notices stopped. Inspectors canceled. The HOA's grip evaporated. Karen faded out, no drama, just silence. Neighbors relaxed, routines returned. No more whispered warnings. No more tiptoeing around inspections. The old rules stood: respect, privacy, peace. Turns out real authority doesn't come from paperwork or confidence. It comes from consent and clarity. Karen's whole approach collapsed, not with a fight, but with a quiet recalibration of facts. Looking back, the most damaging part of her strategy wasn't paperwork or pressure, but assuming authority where none existed. Once that illusion vanished, so did her control. Out here, peace is something protected, not imposed. Systems correct themselves when fed the truth, and misuse of power just dissolves quietly, completely. Stories like this aren't unique. If you faced a neighbor or an HOA using paperwork and pressure to control what's yours, tell your story in the comments. Let's shine a light on how real homeowners stand their ground. Not with rage, but with patience and proof. Sometimes the strongest move is to hold your ground and let everything false fall away on its own. These days, the road's empty, my work is my own, and the only authority out here is the quiet I came for. So, here's a question for you. Where should the line be drawn between community order and individual rights? Have you ever seen power misused where you live? Share your stories. Let's get real about what justice looks like when it finally finds its place.